there's a large underground group of people who assert that a London Underground map is no longer fit for purpose. It's relied on its lauded history from the time of Beck and his magnificent 1933 original. You can tell I quite like it. And I'm one of those people who think the current map's crap. So what I'm going to do in this talk is explore a little of a redesign of that famous map that I've done as an arrogant cartographer who thinks he can do a better job than Transport for London. So, just before I get, is there anybody from Transport for London here? Just want to be sure. No? Any lawyers? Okay, well, okay. In that case,
mind the
map. Okay. So, is Georg here? No, he's one of those who said he'd missed my presentation. At the International Cartographic Conference in Cape Town last month, Georg expressed the opinion that cartographers take raw materials and quite often make diamonds out of them. And I thought I'll slip a little slide in here for Georg, because he's going to be here today. Because I think what I'm going to talk about is an example of a story of how a cartographic diamond has somehow been crafted back into a great big lump of horrible black coal. The inference here is the old diamond symbology on the very early Beck map and the Battersea power station, coal-fired power station. Okay, so before we do all that, before we move forward, we have to go back to the future. It gets worse. Longest journey, our series part is, I'd like us to consider a crucial question. What I think is a crucial question of whether holding on to an iconic brand, maybe an iconic map with all its flaws, okay, is preferable to letting go of it, okay, and starting from scratch, designing a completely new map rather than just keeping adding to it. So I'd like you just to think about that as cartography people. You know, we're all in the map game to one extent or another. When do you draw the line? When do you just get rid of something and start again from a blank piece of paper? And I want you to just think about that yourselves, because you all have different places where that line will be. Let me explain a little bit about my fascination with the map. As many of you, and this is where I take the shirt off. Sorry, hang on. No, as many of you will know or recall, I've got a long-held fascination with this map. Fetish might be a better way of describing it. This is Beck's original map that I'm talking about here. But schematic maps in general, I just have sort of an affinity with them. I like their clarity, their simplicity, and just their aesthetic. It's my favourite map. I think it's an icon. It's as much a part of what we think of as London itself. If you ask people, what do you think of London? Quite often the map will be one of the examples that they will give. So much so that there's a very long story behind this that involves my wife wanting a tattoo, being scared. I said, I'll go and get one first. So I went and got one on my arm. She still hasn't. Anyway. So this is the original 1933 map. As I've said, I think it's an icon. It's undeniably useful for navigation, for wayfinding. It's topological, it's reductive, it eschews above ground detail apart from the River Thames. It's got a minimalist symbol vocabulary. There's not a lot going on. Uses bright colours to symbolise and distinguish different lines. There's omission of detail, there's distortion of scale, there's a schematic design ideal. It's color coded to fit a corporate design. Straight lines, horizontal, vertical, 45 degrees, which illustrates not just the efficiency of the map, but the speed and the efficiency of the network itself. The map and the network are supposed to work in parallel to sort of riff off each other. As I've already said, diamonds for interchange stations in this very first iteration. It's a practical outcome of what Harry Beck was trying to achieve. But here's the critical thing. There were 7 lines and 212 stations. And those two numbers are important. 7 lines, 212 stations. But over time, the design, in my opinion, it's been bent out of shape. It's been overused. It's been abused. I think it's been abused by TfL themselves. And it's also been used as a scaffold to hang all sorts of other stuff onto over time. Now, I've talked about this before. Some of you may have heard me talk about this at BCS before. I've published a couple of papers, presentations, some of them with Bill Cartwright, who I think shares most of my opinions, but he's far politer. And so, you know, this latest piece of work is an iteration of work that I've been involved in over a period of time, even to the extent that I thought, I'm going to do this myself. And I created a web map as a pastiche. Every single stop is someone else's tube map, and you can click on it and go to all myriad of other different people's maps. It's kind of a meta tube map of tube maps to end all tube maps. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that route any further. Yeah. No. In the period between 1933 and 2019, something clearly changed. There are now 11 tube lines, a light railway, 5 overground services, a tram network, and several other overground rail services, and there's now 487 stations. But it still retains the basic principles that Beck brought to it in 1933. So in my view, and that of quite a few others, it's not just me, it's lost its way, it's gone down the wrong track, it's full of clutter. Yes, there was a pun in there, thank you for smiling. So in my view, it's about time we tried to just break with tradition, just rather than just keep adding, and see what can be done. And remember, this is just the front of the map. The back of the little trifold map is also full of clutter. But the interesting thing about this contains a whole lot of useful information about station types, accessibility, services at each station, etc., that also is on the front of the map somehow. And now, I was always taught a mission is a real key tenet in cartography. Get rid of as much as you can. TfL have put basically everything that's on the back of the map on the front of the map as well. Why? It's rhetorical, you're right. So, like I said, I decided it was time to have a go at making a new map. Now then, when I approach a new cartographic puzzle, I need inspiration. What better inspiration than 1980s horror films?
We have such sights to show you.
There we go. Not quite a Rubik's Cube. So I made my own pinhead. Not in my head, on a piece of board. It's 800 nails at 3 centimeter intervals. I deliberately want to do something manual. And actually, this goes back to a little bit of what Bill was talking about this morning. We've kind of lost the art of just drawing, the physicality, the tacticality, I think, or however it was pronounced. So I made this pegboard, and I then went down to the haberdashery and brought a whole load of nice, brightly coloured thread. And I wanted to make my tube map from scratch. But because I was doing it this way, winding thread around the map, in a sense, if something didn't work, I could just move it. You know, I wasn't constrained by a digital thing that I've either coded or I wasn't dragging something with a mouse and then, oh, I've got to change that bend and move that vertices, all that. I wasn't worried about that. So I kind of made my map like that. I will spare you the pain of telling you how I got it into ArcGIS Pro, but I did. And I came up with this. This was my map in 2019. It retained the iconic colours. It's got a kind of series of, a series of diamond motifs that kind of riff off Beck's original symbology. Labels are all horizontal. There's no overlaps. Typography, I actually developed a way of using typography in a hierarchical sense, rather than just a single font size and style across the map. I changed station symbology. I made it much more simple. I removed all the extraneous detail that everybody finds contentious, like the fare zones, like the accessibility symbols at every single station. That's on the back, so I'm not duplicating it. And you have to have something that brings a little bit of originality, I think, to a map. So the Thames is on there, but it's the actual geographical Thames rather than a stylized Thames. I don't know why, I just liked it, and that's my justification. So then you put your work out for some sort of review, and you take it to a conference and you share it. And this was in Vienna in April 2019. I caused some at least to pour scorn on my efforts. Now, the interesting thing about this is this guy was particularly riled, particularly about the text size, the font size. But instead of having a conversation, I already knew this. I was printing this thing out the day before I went to the conference, and I looked at it and thought, text is too small. I knew it myself. But instead of having a conversation, I put it on Twitter. So I sent it off to another guy, Cameron Booth, who was a little more balanced, I felt, had some very interesting comments to make that he didn't like. But what I liked about Cameron's review was that he thought it's worth the effort, which was my intent. It's worth the effort to try to bring something different to the table, to try to challenge what's already there, maybe try to suggest that there's maybe a better way forward. But I put the map on the back burner for a while. That was 2019. Until in 2022, the Elizabeth line opened, the new map came out, and I looked at it. I won't tell you exactly what I said, so I've got away with a little profanity, and I'm not going the full hog on this one. I don't think it's very good. This is the result of what was referred to as an 18-month root and branch redesign. Thank you. And this is what, according to John Hunter, head designer at Transport for London, and I quote, "This new map isn't complicated. What would Beck have done? It would probably look like what we have done today." And everybody I know said, "We respectfully disagree." Basically, just new stuff is added. Okay, there's no omission. There's no craft left in this map. Cartography is about craft, about designing something that looks as good as it functions as well, right? And crucially, there was no real movement of the elements that exist to accommodate all the additions. Thameslink, the Elizabeth line, new stations, more clutter, less space, and even to the extent that TfL, because they haven't got any money, sold sponsorship space to IKEA. So there's that great big band across the bottom. Worse than that, at Croydon, and where else? There's five or six of them all across the map, little IKEA symbols. Now, I don't know about you, I've never seen anybody try to take a Billy bookcase on the London Underground. So why you need to navigate on the Underground to go to IKEA and back, unless you're just going for candles and a pot plant, I don't know. So I got particularly riled about this, and we've definitely reached a junction. Harry Beck's classic map has been cancelled. Okay, they've ruined it, in my view. So what I did was do a good editorial job, or at least an editorial job of some description. And what I put on this markup sheet were problems that I'd identified that others had also identified. So I collated a lot of work that people have been doing in this area. And the one glaring error on this new map is just blatant inconsistency. And a consistent design language is the cornerstone to any well-designed map. So some lines are abutted, some aren't, despite the same physical character. Some lines cut across other with a small margin, most do not. The once simple interchange symbol is now a whole series of different things that are too prominent, overused, with too many connectors as well between components of a station. There's so many unnecessary bends and curves. Thameslink in particular just basically snaked up through the map. Awful. I would go on, but I'd be scrolling until Christmas. So this is the kind of thing that we know as editors of maps. You know, when we're looking at our own maps, we do these things, whether it's physical markup sheet like this or otherwise. I don't know whether you can read any of those. Probably not, which is a good thing because I didn't hold back. So it's, you know, what is this? Why have you done this? Change this. And I was directing myself that these were things that I felt had to change on whatever I redid on my 2019 map to accommodate the problems of TfL's 2022 map. So, need some inspiration. So where do you go? You go back. I asked myself, what would Pinhead do?
We'll tear your soul apart.
Okay. Fair enough. So in cartographic sense, that's basically rip it up and start again. You know, I mean, honestly, genuinely, the soul of the map has died. It's gone. So let's create a new one. That's how I view it anyway. So in map terms, I'm going to rip it up and start again. I started with I didn't go back to the pegboard. It's still in my garage if anybody wants it. It's taking up space. I don't know what to do with it. It's just... and I tore my map up digitally. I got it into various components and I began accommodating all of those different elements. I spent weeks rebuilding it based on feedback I got on my 2019 version, including the guy that was a little disparaging because, you know, sometimes when you get negative feedback, you know, your immediate reaction is, well, that was a bit harsh, wasn't it? It was a bit mean. And then you sit back and you think, yeah, they had a point, you know, and just, okay, that's fine. So you take that on board and you build the map. And I came up with this. Now you might be looking at that and thinking,
what do you mean you've seen this? It's brand new.
And it does look a little bit more like the old tube map, like the original or the one that TfL have got. But it is brand new. And I'm going to say a few things now that you might agree or disagree with, because you can review this just as much as I can. I think it's got a better overall balance. It's stations first, not lines. And that's crucial for navigation and wayfinding. You've got to be able to find the stations. Mm-hmm. I've removed those contrived diamond shapes that I had on my 2019 version, which I kind of thought looked cute originally. Not really. They look rubbish. They're just contrived. The lines don't do that. So let's not do that. I've removed all the extraneous information. I've retained the River Thames as a curvy line because I like it. And that's how I justify it to myself. I'll show you a little bit about the hierarchical typography in a moment, but I like that from the original. But I made the font much larger, much more visible, legible, much more simpler station symbology. The current tube map, this is the science bit, okay? The current tube map has 259 curves and 256 interchange symbols. And if people say, what do you do in your job? That's what I do, count them. And this map has 195 curves and 225 interchange symbols. Same geography, okay, same thing. How can one person make it, and I can tell you, 19.5% more graphically efficient? And that's just one set of numbers divided by the other, right? It's not, you know, it's a stupid number. But, it's basically a fifth more efficient graphically in terms of sinuosity and, the number of symbols used for stations. So it's got to mean something. But I digress. I wanted to go a little bit further by taking the map down a different route altogether. And this is the current classification of lines, right, which is heavily biased on the historical organization, the historical colors that, Beck started. But I think it's misleading because of this insistence on using a legacy classification. It's now inconsistently applied because we've got all of these different modes of transport now integrated into the map. Remember I said we've got the subsurface tube, we've got heavy rail, we've got sort of cut and fill tube, deep tube. What am I missing? Trams, overground. We've got lots of different things. Thank you. We've got lots of different things going on. So where I've got various lines here, sort of Bakerloo, Central, Jubilee, North, these are all deep tube lines. Okay, Circle, District, Metropolitan, Hammersmith and City are all subsurface lines. They're really the same thing. So maybe we should start showing them as the same thing, right? So these are the routes by mode, because on any of the different modes, we have different routes. So you could say that on the deep tube, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 8 routes. There's a Bakerloo route, there's a Jubilee route, but they're all deep tube. Now, I know this is hard to get your head around because we've had this drummed into us for nearly 100 years. We see London in a very a very specific way. I'm just asking you to suspend disbelief and bear with me for a second. I don't think we can demarcate lines in the way in which the current official tube map does. Even some of the naming conventions, I think, don't really make a lot of sense. Why is it the Elizabeth line and not just Elizabeth? I mean, Hammersmith and City doesn't really make much sense anymore, nor does Waterloo and City, not really. You know, you could shorten them, make them brief. So, wait for it. What I'm proposing is we change the colours. Said Great Scott. Now it's Doc. Okay. All right, let's have a vote. The likes, the dislikes. All right, that's fine, you see. Now, just ask yourself if you dislike it. Are you disliking it because of 100 years of legacy colour history, or just you don't like those colours I've picked? I don't know. So, no distinction. Right. This new colour scheme is now accessible for folks with different colour vision. The current TfL map is not. The only way you can, if you have different colour vision, the only way you can use the current map is by downloading the specific black and white one that TfL create with a whole slew of patterned lines. It's a great map. I'm just saying they've had to create a second map to accommodate that. I would argue this is more consistent, more coherent. I would argue that this suits the 2023 design aesthetic better than a colour system that was designed 90 plus years ago for a completely different system that was much simpler then than it is now. Now, I've randomly named the overground lines. Note that as of last month, overground, it's all going to, they've decided on the names, I think, and they're verbose, but then it's TfL, so what would you expect? Now, this is where it gets interesting, because I think what you can also do, if you simplify a lot of stuff on the tube map, is actually add some more useful detail on there that is not currently on there. How many times have you been in London and you're waiting for a tube? Maybe you know where you're going, so you hardly look at the map anyway, you hardly look at the front of a train, you hardly look at the matrix signs, you know pretty much what you're doing. But somebody said to you, the train's coming in, it's just going to Heathrow. And you look at it, no. And they're like, yeah, but this is the Piccadilly line. Ah, yeah, but this train's going to Hatton Cross. Yeah, but Hatton Cross is on the same line as Heathrow. Yeah, it doesn't go all the way to Heathrow there. So it's not true that every train on each of the lines goes from one extremity to the other. Often they go like that. Or often the Northern Line will shoot off to Mill Hill East occasionally, and you've missed your... There are mini routes within each line, and that's not information that is obvious to the tourist, the casual commuter. And I'm not talking about people who do this every day, because they know their route without worrying about maps or anything else. So I think you can add each line segment on the map with another piece of information, or you can add another piece of information to show which subroutes use that section. And I think that's useful for journey planning. I'll just show the legend briefly because it illustrates my hierarchy of stations. I start off with negative space, then fill them in a little bit with grey space for where you can transfer, and then blue if it's an interchange with National Rail. So it's basically the same symbol. I'm just using a slightly different colour. but it's within the same dimensions, it's within the same form. And yes, it looks a little bit like Vignelli's map, because that's my second favorite map in the world, and I love it. So I borrowed something from somebody else's map. Some would say stolen, but borrowed is a nice way to phrase it. And you can see what I've done with the hierarchy of font here. Different sizes, but also an interchange with National Rail has large blue text. Blue means something. How many tourists come into Britain know what that historic British rail symbol is? When did we privatise Britain? What 2 decades ago, and we're still using the symbol on the map. It means nothing to people. I think text, symbolised and organised in a better way, means something. And so this is my map that 25 minutes ago I said I was going to show you. So this is my redesign, okay? It's restructured from the 2019 version. It's recoloured. So all of the deep tube lines have the same colour, all the subsurface lines have the same colour, etc., etc. Now, you might not like the colours, and that's fine, but I think it's consistent in terms of a design language and in the application of the ideas that I want to put into the map. So it's the culmination of my current design thinking. Lots of small decisions that I think take the map beyond simply just an arrangement of lines. And if I zoom in a little bit, you won't be able to read it, but you'll just see the little marks next to various line segments. These are just the little codes that match that legend I showed you a moment ago that tell you about which particular train travels on that route between adjacent stations. So there's an immediate way of looking at the front of a train. Upminster, great, okay, yeah, right, I can get on that train. There's an immediate link between the map, the matrix sign on the platform, and the matrix sign on the front of the train, which there isn't at the moment. And then some stations you'll see act as terminuses. Actually, Euston's a good one in the middle. And there's a little block there. It acts as a terminus for an overground service, but not for anything else. It's a through station for every other underground line that accesses it. Okay, now finally, almost finally, why have I called this map London Underground Overground? Because most of it is actually, in fact, overground now, not underground at all. But actually, the real reason is Easter eggs, because you've got to put Easter eggs in your map. And, you know, the one I showed you earlier, yes, the Pink Floyd pig is flying over Battersea Power Station, and I could play animals here for you, but it's quite long. So instead, I've added a little station down here, which, given the recent hoo-ha about Bond Street being changed to Burberry Street, and which I think is a dreadful idea, I probably shouldn't add an extra station, but it means we can have a dance.
Underground, overground, wumbling free. The wumbles of Wimbledon.
There you go. There you get a picture, Claire.
Making good use of the things that we find.
On me.
Things that the everyday folks
I'm going to leave this code. This has got a great line.
Bulgaria, we can remember the days when it wasn't behind the times. Where this map of the world, pick up the papers.
As a kid, Uncle Bulgaria had a map of the world. Anyway, there we go. So this was going to be pretty much the end of the presentation. I've made some contentious calls. I've challenged colour, font, style. But let's not forget that in 1933, Harry Beck's map wasn't particularly seen as something that TfL wanted, not TfL at that particular time, but they didn't want it. It was initially shunned. Before, it's now become regarded as a design classic. Now, I'm not in any way saying that my map is, but what I've tried to do is challenge maps that I think no longer suit their original purpose. And I think creating alternatives helps inform a wider discussion. And that was going to be it, but I've got 2 slides because things change even since I submitted this PowerPoint last week. September's map, what's this? with snowflakes all over. I've done snowflakes. I know what a snowflake looks like. We have snowflakes on the London Underground. Apparently, air-conditioned trains. It's a symbol for lines with air conditioning. It's basically the subsurface lines. Okay, there's no deep tube has air conditioning. On the Elizabeth line, if you've been on that, it's freezing. All right. So, how is navigation supported by? I mean, are you going to go on a train? And go, I'm going to take all the aircon trains. No, that's not how you navigate between A and B. You go between where you want to go, where you're at, and where you want to go. Not whether your train's air conditioned or whether it's got 5G. And the cable car's got windows. If that isn't air conditioning, what is? So I propose a modification to my map that includes a proper classified scale of London Underground heat by line. Anyway, there we go. Right, so that's pretty much it. I just want to say one last very final thing. My mentor, and I guess a lot of people in here knew this guy, Roger Anson, died this year. And so I just wanted to pay a little personal tribute to Roger in this. If you want my underground map, or you want to read any of the blogs, or you want a copy of the snowflake map, there's the URL. You can just go along and have there, and all the stuff's there for you. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
This train is ready to leave. Please mind the doors. Please stand clear of the doors.
Couldn't resist.
Well, quick question.
I like a question.
Is it read what?
Is it a map or a diagram?
It's a map.
Okay. Yeah.
The London Underground is a map, and the New York one is a diagram. Is that right? Go on,
Tony.
I think the biggest mistake that Transport for London did was to include Thameslink. Not only does it doesn't conform to the diagrammatic genre, but also adds enormous amounts of clutter. And they admit themselves that it's not on the map. It says it's not operated by us. But one question: you divided up the Northern Line, Northern Fleet.
2 routes.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Yeah,
Well, so
I know the route, but why did you do that?
well, because if you're a tourist and you want the Northern Line, it's the Northern Line. How many of them know intuitively? There's actually 2 separate bits. It's two.
I know
It's
this,
two
yeah.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going to call them 2 separate things.
Thank you. Right, we're going to have to move on because we've got one more the gentleman there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm in London, I'm in a rush, I'm at Oxford Circus, I've got to get to Victoria. Using your system, which line do I use?
Take the bus.
Same colour, so how do I know which one?
Take anything you want. Doesn't matter.
Victoria.
Yeah. It won't matter.
Be busy on all of them.